Good day, everyone. I'm Jack KANACK, the weather medic, the doctor of weather. My co-host, JJ PTAK. JJ.
Here I am. How you doing, Jack?
Very good. I'd like to thank you for all joining us today. We're going to talk about Presidential Inauguration Day weather, beginning with George Washington and ending with Joe Biden, plus a few weather and fun facts along the way. Your emails are always welcome. If you have a weather question or a question regarding the show, you can reach me by my email at wxmedic@gmail.com. That is WX, the abbreviation for weather, and the word medic @gmail.com. Also, if you are new to this channel and like the content, please subscribe and hit the like button. And now we're on part 3 of the outdoor presidential march inaugurations from 1873 through 1933, where, of course, the weather records, JJ, are now official. How about that?
How about that? They finally decided to keep some records.
Yeah. So we have
official all this stuff.
Yeah, we have official records. And now for the March inaugurations from 1873 to 1933, I did some number crunching, and for all the inaugurations, our average temperature was 37 degrees Fahrenheit, with our average high temperature of 43.5 degrees Fahrenheit and our average low temperature 30.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Our coldest low was 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Coldest high was 20 degrees Fahrenheit, also in 1873. So we will talk about that one really shortly. And our warmest high temperature was 58 degrees Fahrenheit in 1885 and 1913. As for precipitation, our wettest day was in 1889 when we had 86 hundredths of an inch of rain. So for those that don't know what 100th of an inch is, think of when your street gets from dry to wet, that's 100th of an inch. And our snowiest day was in 1909 when they had 9.8 inches of snow in Washington, D.C.
That's 9.8 inches of snow. That's not a harbinger of good things.
No, well, of course, back then, too, 9.8 inches of snow to clear it.
They did not have plows back then.
We're going to talk about what they had to go through. So that's coming up in the video.
Back in 1873, we have Ulysses S. Grant, the second inauguration of this presidency. And here we have an illustration of the former Union General Ulysses S. Grant braving the bitter cold as he takes the oath of office on March 4th of 1873. The location was the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C.
And, of course, the reason there were no photographs, because it was a freaking cold day. The morning low that day was 4 degrees Fahrenheit, which was a record for the month of March. And this day remains the coldest March day on record up to this date. During the day, bitterly cold winds gusted up to 40 miles per hour. By noon, the temperature was only 16 degrees Fahrenheit. It was clear, windy, and of course, with that bitter cold, high temperatures that day only reached 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind chill temperatures were 15 to 30 below zero. Now, what was interesting was he had cadets and midshipmen were standing on the mall for more than an hour and a half without overcoats. Several of them collapsed. And when the president delivered his inaugural address, the wind made his words, like I'm just saying right now, inaudible to even those on the platform with him. I mean, his face kind of froze. And yeah, I just kind of made like, you know, my words were slurred because you couldn't talk. The inaugural ball was held in a temporary building without heat Some say that it ended early when the food froze. So JJ, it's like, no, we're done. The food froze.
Yeah, yeah. Somehow that whole big party from start to end was not right.
That right. And it was halted at midnight, so people who had been dancing in their overcoats and heavy wraps could go home and get warm. And of course, it was the coldest March 4th inauguration in both official record high and low, and of course, average temperatures. So, man,
Yeah, something's really wrong with that picture. Come on, guys, think this through.
Yeah, it's like, well, it just shows you back in the day, they didn't have heated buildings. You know,
They also didn't have heated minds. I would have thought that, hey, it's 4 degrees. Let's go someplace else.
Yeah, yeah.
Not like they were recording it on TV, and even if they weren't, folks were holding us up for a couple hours while we moved indoors.
Right. Well, that's why there was no picture. Probably the camera froze as well. So
I think the artist drawing that might have froze.
Yeah. Oh man, what a bitter
day.
day.
He didn't get pneumonia or something.
No, he didn't, but I'm sure
cadets did.
the cadets were frozen, like freezer frozen, you know.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That whole thing didn't make sense.
No.
Well, don't vote for this guy here. He's not going to let us go back inside.
Well said.
Jeez. In 1877, we have the inauguration of Rutherford B. Hayes.
Yeah, and this photograph, JJ, I have to tell everybody, because for using the photograph, I have to tell everyone that it's a photograph from the architect of the Capitol. So they're allowing me to use the photograph as long as I give them verbal attribution to their photograph. It's their photograph number there.
That's a very interesting picture. If you look on the left-hand side, it looks like that one person is a ghost.
Yep.
The second one from the left.
Yep. Yep.
I think they had to do some kind of a time thing there. I'm not sure.
Well, I think they were moving, and I think the photograph blurred.
Yeah, they didn't have quite the technology that they developed later on.
Yeah, that's what I think it was.
So we have a photograph.
Yep, from the architect of the Capitol.
So the inauguration of Rutherford B. Hayes as the 19th President of the United States took place publicly on Monday, March the 5th of 1877 at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this was a 23rd inauguration and marked the commencement of the only 4-year term of Rutherford B. Hayes as president and William A. Wheeler as vice president. As March 4th, 1877 fell on a Sunday, Hayes was sworn in at the Red Room of the White House on March 3rd, becoming the first president. Okay, we have something interesting here. The presidential oath of office in the White House. This ceremony was held in secret under tight security, as the previous year's election had been so bitterly divisive, to the point that the outgoing president, Grant, feared an insurrection by Samuel J. Tilden supporters, while assuring any Democratic Party attempt to hijack a public inauguration ceremony would fail.
Boy, I'm glad we never had to go through any of that in our lives, huh?
No, not at all.
So the score is 1 Democratic takeover was the early one. And then, of course, in 2021, we had the one Republican group try to take over the inauguration ceremonies and, you know, what was going on. But history is repeating itself here. I don't know if people out there knew that, but there was very a lot of bitterness in the election, and they had a group of dedicated people that really wanted to take over. So
some people just don't know how to concede politely.
Right. But boy, you don't think that would happen again in history, and of course it did. So it was 35 degrees Fahrenheit with brief periods of light snow. And that, of course, was a ceremony on March 5th.
And they did that outside in light snow. They
Yeah.
really got to start thinking this stuff through. Then back in 1881, James A. Garfield was inaugurated as the 20th President of the United States on Friday, March 4th of 1881. And this was at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this was the 24th inauguration and marked the commencement of the only four-year term of James A. Garfield as president, and Chester A. Arthur was the vice president. Garfield died 199 days into this term, and Arthur succeeded to the presidency. And here we have a lovely overexposed photo of that event.
Well, at least we have a photo. They're trying.
Yes, they're trying hard. Well, they were still working with early technology.
Right. 33 degrees Fahrenheit, snowed all night until about 10 a.m. The afternoon was sunny and windy.
In 1881, on September the 19th, President Chester Arthur was sworn in as a president of the United States. Judge Brady, Justice of the New York State Supreme Court, administered that to Vice President Arthur at his residence in New York on September the 20th of 1881. This inauguration marked the commencement of Chester A. Arthur's only term, a partial term of 3 years and 165 days as a 21st president. This was the fourth non-scheduled extraordinary inauguration ever to take place in the last in the 19th century, and was the first to take place in New York City since George Washington's first inauguration in 1789.
And of course, the weather being in September in New York City, very nice. It was 75 degrees Fahrenheit for temperature, and the weather was fair.
And they didn't have a camera set up over there, so we got stuck with the drawing on this one.
Right. We have a drawing because being a special type of swearing in ceremony, they really didn't have the equipment to rush everyone there and get this thing done.
And back then they had to put the camera up on the tripod and throw the black
it was
cloth
very
over them, and
it was very specialized, and very few people. It wasn't like everyone had a phone camera up, just shooting stuff.
yeah. And now we're at 1885, Grover Cleveland. We have the inauguration of Cleveland, delivering his inaugural address to the crowd on the East Portico of the U.S. Capitol. That's a nice photo there, getting better with their pictures.
Yep.
The first inauguration of Grover Cleveland as the 22nd President of the United States was held on Wednesday, March the 4th of 1885. At the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. This was the 25th inauguration, and this marked the commencement of the first four-year term of Grover Cleveland as the president, and only term of Thomas A. Hendricks as the vice president. Cleveland's second inauguration took place 8 years after his first, as his two terms in office were not consecutive, and he is the only U.S. president to serve non-consecutive terms.
And
we have another one who wants to try that, and I'm hoping you don't make it.
Yes, I was just going to say, let's hope that the other one that really wants to have a second term doesn't get a second term.
Yeah.
He who shall not be named. the orange man. It was, talking about orange, it was 54 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. That high temperature for the day was 58 degrees Fahrenheit. And that tied, when we get to it, 1913, that inauguration day, for the warmest official recorded temperature on a March 4th inauguration day.
And in 1889, the inauguration of Benjamin Harrison as the 23rd President of the United States took place that year on Monday, March 4th. At the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., and this was the 26th inauguration and marked the commencement of the only four-year term of Benjamin Harrison as president and Levi P. Morton as vice president. Gee, I'm learning these vice presidents' names now. And this oath was administered as rain poured down.
Your grandfather.
Oh, this guy's president was William Henry Harrison. the president who died in 1841 is kind of interesting.
Yeah, you notice the photograph does show all the umbrellas. And it was interesting. A couple things are interesting to me is that, of course, this guy was the grandfather, William Harry Harrison, the guy that died. Remember, he caught the rocket pneumonia and the boogie woogie flu.
Right.
And I don't want to beat around the bush here, but it seems like there's a precedent in this country of electing people that were related to a past president. I'm sure some people are enjoying that little pun. It was 43 degrees Fahrenheit. It rained all day. The total rainfall was 86 hundredths of an inch. Harrison took his oath of office in a downpour under an umbrella, and this made it nearly impossible for horses and carriages to move toward the event. This was the wettest officially recorded March 4th inauguration day.
It was pretty close to 1 inch of rain there.
Yeah, it was a real soaker.
And the second inauguration of Grover Cleveland as the 24th president of the United States took place on Saturday, March 4th of 1893. And pictured here is the flag from 1882, and marked the commencement of the second and final 4-year term of Grover Cleveland as president, and the only term of Adlai Stevenson as vice president. Cleveland had previously been the 22nd president and was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms.
It was 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow began during the early morning hours and ended around 1 p.m. So it snowed during the inauguration. 1 to 2 inches fell across the area. A biting wind blew from the northwest. The crowd was small for the ceremony, and many planned events were canceled. Now, an interesting fun fact is that on the $1,000 bill, there used to be a $1,000 bill, which they don't have anymore. They got rid of it, I believe, in around 1930, somewhere around there, because of counterfeiters.
I got one in my back pocket, man. Pocket change.
Well, I saw one.
With a $1,000 bill,
Yeah, I saw one go up for auction. This one that I have pictured here, the series from 1928. It went up for auction, and those type of bills were selling for $1,700.
More than it was worth. I can't imagine what you would do. You're not going to take this to the Dollar Tree.
You mean you're not going to buy a pack of gum with it? Can you change 1,000?
Oh, yeah, sure. And here in 1897, we have a photo of the inauguration. We have Chief Justice Melville Fuller administering the oath of office to McKinley as president in 1897. A nice color photo there. And outgoing President Grover Cleveland stands to the right. The first inauguration of William McKinley as the 25th president of the United States took place on Thursday, March 4th of 1897 in the old Senate chamber at the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this was the 28th inauguration and marked the commencement of the first and eventually only full term of William McKinley as president and the only term of Garrett Hobart as vice president. And this was the first inauguration to be recorded on film.
Yeah, so
over here.
So notice the technology increasing. You went from, hey, a few years ago, 30 years ago, we had black and white photographs that weren't good. All of a sudden we have color, we have film. Yeah, it was 40 degrees Fahrenheit and clear for this inauguration.
And here in 1901, we have William McKinley, the inauguration of the President McKinley summary crowd standing on and in front of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., with McKinley standing on the podium in the middle. And this is an official architect of the Capitol photograph is here. And tell us about that, Jack.
Right. And we have to say that in exchange for using that photograph. So we just did it and covered ourselves. The architect of the Capitol.
Ooh.
Right.
Well, this second inauguration of William McKinley as President of the United States was held on March 4th of 1901 at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., and this was a 29th inauguration, and it marked the commencement of the second and final four-year term of William McKinley as president and the only term of Theodore Roosevelt as vice president. And McKinley died 194 days into this term, and Roosevelt succeeded to the presidency.
Right. And it was 47 degrees Fahrenheit, overcast. It rained overnight and then began again during the ceremony and ended at 3:45 p.m. Total rainfall for the day was 0.32 inches, so about a third of an inch of rain fell.
In 1901, we had the first inauguration of Theodore Roosevelt as the 26th president of the United States. This took place on Saturday, September 14th of 1901, right here in Buffalo, at the Ansley Wilcox House at 641 Delaware Avenue, right here in Buffalo, New York, following the death of President William McKinley earlier that day. The inauguration, the fifth non-scheduled extraordinary inauguration to ever take place, and the first in the 20th century, marked the commencement of the first term, a partial term of 3 years and 171 days, of Theodore Roosevelt as a president, and John R. Hazel administered this oath of office. And yeah, tell us a little.
And of course, being Buffalo based from this broadcast here, the president was over at the Pan American Exposition where he caught a bullet. And the thing that's interesting here is why do we have a drawing instead of a photograph? Well, they did have photographs, and they had a crew ready to photograph this inauguration. But what happened was that if you've ever done photographing professionally, whether it's some big event, it's like a contact sport. And all these photographers were in the Wilcox house bumping elbows and pushing and shoving. And what happened was that Roosevelt kicked him out. He kicked everybody out. He says, if you guys you can't behave and shoot do your photographs, then no one's going to get a photograph. So we have no photograph because Roosevelt kicked him out.
For position,
yeah, they were all jockey. Was like a contact sport. For those that have never done it, they don't kind of understand. But for those of us that have been there and have done this type of stuff, it is like a contact sport. 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Clear. The noon temperature here in Buffalo was estimated, but being in September, it was a Chamber of Commerce day in Buffalo. So the next slide we have is a slide of the interior of the room in the Wilcox house where Theodore Roosevelt took the presidential oath of office, and that's a picture of that as well.
Ever been there, Jack?
Never been there.
Well, I've been there a few times. Matter of fact, my family had a party there a couple of years ago.
I was scheduled to speak there, but then, of course, the COVID blew that. If you're in downtown Buffalo, go and check them out, 641 Delaware Avenue.
And this is in 1905, President Roosevelt's inauguration address, and this was the second inauguration of Theodore Roosevelt as the 26th President of the United States. This took place Saturday, March 4th of 1905 at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this was the 30th inauguration and marked the beginning of the second and only full term of Theodore Roosevelt as president and the only term of Charles W. Fairbanks as vice president. Nice color photograph over here. Actually, side by side, same ones. I'm not sure why they do that.
That's what I was able to get. It was 45 degrees Fahrenheit. We had sunny with strong northwest winds, and we had patches of snow remained on the ground from a light snowfall the day before.
Moving right along here, we have 1909, the president picture of, we have a picture here of President H. Taft. He's photographed with Edward F. Stallwagon, and he's the chief of the inaugural committee with Vice President James S. Sherman. This inauguration of William Howard Taft as the 27th president of the United States was held on Thursday, March 4th of 1909 at the Senate chamber inside the United States Capitol at Washington, D.C. instead of the regular East Portico. Smart guy, due to a blizzard.
Well, at least this guy was thinking. He didn't have cadets
Yeah.
outside in the blizzard.
Yeah, this guy was thinking. This was the 31st inauguration and marked the commencement of William Howard Taft's only term as president and James S. Sherman's only term as vice president. And due to a blizzard the night before that covered Washington, D.C. with 10 inches of snow, the inauguration was moved indoors to the Senate chamber. And then the second photo here was taken in front of the presidential reviewing stand. Holy cow, look at that.
And you could see the people there. That's how they got rid of it before the snowplows. They had shovels and carts and horses. This third picture here is a picture of William H. Taft returning to the snowy, to the White House after his inauguration on a snowy and windy March 4th, 1909. The snow and winds began the day before. Strong winds toppled trees and telephone poles. Trains were stalled and city streets clogged. All activity was brought to a standstill. Sanitation workers shoveled sand and snow throughout half the night. Trains were stalled and city streets clogged, and all activity came to a standstill despite the adverse weather conditions. The inaugural parade was canceled. It took 6,000 men, people, and 500 wagons to clear 58,000 tons of snow and slush from the parade route. Despite the freezing temperatures, howling wind, snow, and sleet, a large crowd gathered in front of the Capitol to view the inauguration, but the weather forced the ceremony indoors. Just after the swearing in, the snow tapered off, of course. So at swearing in time, we had 32 degrees Fahrenheit, heavy snow, drifting snow, and strong winds. The 9.8-inch snowfall ended at 12:20 p.m., but the afternoon remained cloudy and windy. This was March 4th's greatest officially recorded Inauguration Day snowfall.
And back in 1913, we had the inauguration of Woodrow Wilson, and this photo shows a crowd in a line of cadets at the United States Capitol at Washington, D.C. for the first inauguration of Woodrow Wilson. This first inauguration of Woodrow Wilson as the 28th President of the United States was held on Tuesday, March 4th of 1913, and the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., and this was the 32nd inauguration and marked the commencement of the first four-year term of Woodrow Wilson as president and Thomas R. Marshall as vice president.
It was 55 degrees Fahrenheit and overcast, but mild. This was the warmest March 4th inauguration. The high temperature for the day was 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and that tied 1885 for the warmest official temperature for a March 4th inauguration day. So 1 year was really bad, 4 years later, really good.
Yeah, look at all them people standing up on top of the buildings.
Yep, well, it was nice. No ice
nice
that
day.
day.
Everybody's standing up on top, standing on the bottom, standing all around. Big crowd. Here we have in 1917, the second inauguration of President Wilson, and this happened on March the 5th of 1917, and this second inauguration of Woodrow Wilson as the President of the United States was held privately on Sunday, March 4th, 1917, in the President's room inside the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., and publicly on Monday, March 5th of 1917 at the East Portico of the Capitol. This was the 33rd inauguration and marked the commencement of the second and final term of both President Woodrow Wilson as president and Thomas R. Marshall as vice president. And as I see over here, they've got the presidential seal. He's got, it looks like either giant feathers or some palm leaves of some kind over there.
Well,
Really
we
getting
had,
some good foreground. Nice
we,
colorized photo there, so you can't really tell what it
yeah,
is.
if it was color would help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Take what you can get.
there were, of course, crowds of men in Washington for the inauguration, assaulted women picketing the White House and demanding women get the right to vote. Press coverage of the violence and the women's suffrage movement overshadowed that of the inauguration itself.
Well,
So that's
so
what happened.
we had riots at a few things, huh?
Yeah, every time it looks like a president, it's like when you have riots, it's like when you have fights, when you have weddings and funerals, that's where the fights break out. It's like when there's inauguration, everybody's focused on that. You get these groups come out. Yeah. It was 38 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy and windy. And of course, that ceremony was on March 5th.
I wonder why they decided to do two.
Well, because the thing was that Sunday's a holy, a holy day. So the Sundays they always do on Monday.
I think this was probably the first one that they had, the one on Sunday in private. I don't recall the other ones had that.
Yeah, they did. JJ, we're talking about the 1877 insurrection of Rutherford B. Hayes there, where where we had a private ceremony because at the White House on March 3rd, because they were so afraid of this Democratic insurrection
and we're afraid of
hijacking the inauguration ceremony. Yeah.
In 1921, we have President Warren Harding. The inauguration of Warren G. Harding as the 29th President of the United States was held on Friday, March 4th of 1921 at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this was the 34th inauguration and marked the commencement of Warren G. Harding's only term as president and of Calvin Coolidge's only term as vice president. Harding died 2 years and 151 days into this term, and Coolidge succeeded to the presidency.
It was 38 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny.
And on August 3rd of 1923, we have President Calvin Coolidge. A drawing here, the first inauguration of Calvin Coolidge as the 30th President of the United States was held on that date, Friday, August 3rd of 1923 at the Coolidge homestead in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, following the death of President Warren G. Harding. The previous evening, the inauguration was the sixth non-scheduled extraordinary inauguration to ever take place, marking the commencement of the first term, the partial term of 1 year and 213 days of Calvin Coolidge as president. And his father, John Calvin Coolidge Sr., was a Vermont notary public and justice of the peace, and he administered the oath of office. And this was also witnessed by Mrs. Calvin Coolidge, and there were others there, Leonard L. Lane and Porter H. Dale. And this was on Tuesday, August 21st of 1923, when he repeated this oath again. And I'm looking at this drawing here, kind of an interesting thing to me because I studied fashion briefly, and back then women were starting to shorten their dresses, and you can see her shocking ankles. Because back then you just didn't do that. Prior to this, women wore floor-length dresses. That's kind of an interesting thing to me.
I did not know, but I'm glad you know.
Well, the flapper era was coming in, and that's where they first introduced the even more shocking thing, miniskirts. So you went from floor length to very short over a period of just a few years.
Of course, now anything goes.
Yeah, really. I'm kind of surprised we don't get a president's wife dressed in some of the interesting clothes that we see out there today. Shreds. Although Jill Biden did wear fishnet nylons a couple weeks back.
Oh, I did not know.
Jack, you don't read a newspaper.
I
They
don't
had
pay
photographs of her.
I don't pay attention to that. But what I do pay attention to, that it was 65 degrees Fahrenheit with fair skies. The ceremony, believe it or not, was at 2:46 a.m. in the Green Mountains of Vermont. And of course, that temperature was estimated probably by the crickets.
And that actually does work.
Yeah.
I've listened to crickets when they were telling me once when I was a kid, and I don't remember anymore what exactly those stats are, but they told us in school that you could judge the temperature by the crickets chirping and by the sound of a fly buzzing, because it seems that when it gets colder, crickets cricket at a slower pace and flies actually go down in tone.
Well, with the crickets, they have a metabolism, and is the frequency of the time they rub their wings together to create a chirp sound in an attempt to attract a mate. This is what it's all about. But the warmer the air temperature is, the greater the frequency of chirps. So to obtain a temperature in Fahrenheit, you count the number of chirps over a 14-second period, and then you add 40. Okay, so that's how it works out. For example, if you have 25 chirps, then you add 40, and it turns out to be 65. So, you know what? That's probably how they did it. That's how they got 65 for that temperature that day.
They were listening to the chirps of the crickets.
Yep, absolutely. Right.
There's always something fun and new, and here we are talking about crickets and presidents. The second inauguration of Calvin Coolidge at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. happened in 1925. This was the 35th inauguration and marked the commencement of the second and only full term of Calvin Coolidge as a president, and the only term of Charles G. Dawes as vice president. Chief Justice William Howard Taft, who had served as president from 1909 to 1913, administered the presidential oath of office. That's kind of an interesting factoid there.
Yep.
And this was the first inauguration in which a former U.S. president administered the oath, and the first to be broadcast nationally on radio.
So see
over there.
So yeah, so the technology, you went from just a simple in the first 100 years ago. Before that, they all of a sudden printed the addresses in the paper, and then you went to that to crude photograph, to better photographs, to now it being on radio, and the technology is really coming along. It was 44 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly sunny skies for that one.
And this is 1929 with Herbert C. Hoover. President Hoover's inauguration, which happened, of course, on March 4th of 1929. This summary is the bird's eye view of the Capitol grounds and inaugural crowds taken from the roof of the Capitol, and looking north, you can see the wet streets.
And you could also see that looked like the rain fog in the background.
Yeah, I see that fog over there. I was just going to comment on that.
Yep.
Well, the inauguration of Herbert Hoover as the 31st president of the United States was held on March 4th, as we said, in 1929. And this was on, of course, the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this was the 36th inauguration and marked the commencement of the only term of both President Herbert Hoover as president and Charles Curtis as vice president. And the Chief Justice and former President William Howard Taft administered this presidential oath of office as well. And this was the first presidential inauguration to be recorded by sound newsreels.
Yes, it was 48 degrees Fahrenheit. A heavy rain began just before the oath of office was administered, and the Capitol grounds and parade route were so crowded that it was impossible for anyone to run for cover. By the time he completed his inaugural address, President Hoover's face was beaded with water, and his suit was wringing wet. Herbert Hoover's inaugural parade moved up Pennsylvania Avenue during a lull in the rain. Intermittent rain continued through the day. The total rainfall was 0.4 of an inch.
And
So,
nobody thought to bring an umbrella, huh?
Another wet one. Well, like my grandparents used to tell me about Hoover is that, of course, it rained that day, so you could fill the pot up with water so you could boil your 2 chickens. That's all I could say. They said when he got elected, they were like, well, put 2 chickens in the pot. And of course, they were right, because then you had the Depression. The inauguration ceremony for Franklin D. Roosevelt on March 4th, 1933 was the last ceremony to be held in a March when the 20th Amendment was ratified. All subsequent inaugurals have been held now in January, and this is an official architect of the Capitol photograph. We have to say that in exchange for using the photograph.
And the first inauguration of Franklin D. Roosevelt as the 32nd President of the United States was held on Saturday, March 4th of 1933 at the East Portico of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. This was the 37th inauguration and marked the commencement of the first term of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and as president, and John Nance Garner as vice president.
And it was 42 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy with a few peaks of sun. Please join us for part 4 of the outdoor presidential January inaugurations from 1937 through the present day, where the weather records are official. I want to thank everyone for listening to Weather Buff, the show on all things weather. Thank you, as always, to my co-host, JJ PTAK.
Very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you here. Your emails are always welcome. If you have a weather question or a question regarding the show, you can reach me by my email at wxmedic@gmail.com. That's WX, the abbreviation for weather, and the word medic at gmail.com. Also, if you are new to this channel and like the content, please subscribe and hit the like button. Thank you for making Weather Buff a part of your day. Good day, everyone.